There's something about the PS2 era that never left us. The RPGs of that time had a unique style, worlds that felt alive and unforgettable. Not every game today can bring that feeling back, but some come surprisingly close. A handful of indie RPGs capture that same soul. They're not massive productions, but they carry that old school magic. So let's dive into 12 indie RPGs that look and feel like PS2 classics. There are games that feel like they slipped out of another time, and The Lightning Kingdom is one of them. From the first minutes, it feels like a PlayStation 2 JRPG you somehow missed back in the day. Floating islands, anime-inspired heroes, colorful villages, and that sense of adventure that makes you want to explore just one more corner before turning the console off. The world is vibrant, full of puzzles, secret paths, and characters that bring charm to every new place you visit. And while the setting feels warm and nostalgic, the combat adds something different. Battles don't rely on turn-based menus. Instead, they play out in real time, almost like a fighting game. You can chain combos, swap characters mid-battle, and throw in elemental magic that makes each encounter feel energetic and fast-paced. It's not perfect, of course. You'll notice small rough edges here and there, but nothing that gets in the way. In fact, it makes it feel even more like those quirky mid-2000s RPGs that dared to be different. Shyness didn't get much attention when it launched, but it carries that spark. The kind of hidden gem that feels like a time capsule from the golden days of the PS2 era. If you've ever wished you could go back and discover one more forgotten classic, this game delivers exactly that feeling. Some indie RPGs wear their inspirations proudly, and Airoheart is one of the clearest love letters to the classics of old. At first glance, it looks like something straight out of the 16-bit era, but the way it's designed, the camera angles, dungeon layouts, and the pacing of its exploration carries that unmistakable PlayStation 2 energy. It feels like a game that could have existed between Alundra and Tales of Symphonia, bridging the gap between puzzle-driven action RPGs and story-heavy adventures. You play as Airoheart, a young hero drawn into a conflict that blends family secrets with a looming war. The journey takes you across fields, forests, and dungeons that feel carefully handcrafted to test your patience and curiosity. There are locked doors waiting for the right item, hidden passages tucked away for those willing to search, and puzzle-based mechanics that remind you of when RPGs demanded a little extra thought. Combat is action-based, but with a steady, deliberate rhythm. You swing swords, use ranged tools, and cast spells, but the design keeps things simple, more about timing and positioning than flashy combos. It's the kind of system that works perfectly for players who grew up with older action RPGs, where each encounter felt tense, even against smaller enemies. Airoheart isn't trying to reinvent the genre. Instead, it feels like a time capsule, a chance to step into an era where indie studios didn't exist, but mid-tier RPGs thrived. For fans who missed that early 2000s vibe, this game scratches the itch, offering nostalgia wrapped in something new. Soul Saga is an indie JRPG that instantly feels like a love letter to the PlayStation 2 era. It brings back the kind of colorful worlds, quirky heroes, and character-driven stories that defined that golden age of RPGs. You follow Mythos, a young adventurer who dreams of climbing the ranks and becoming a guildmaster. The journey begins with lighthearted humor and simple rivalries, but slowly unfolds into something bigger, with guild politics, strange creatures, and looming dangers shaping his path. It's not groundbreaking, but it captures the same adventurous spirit that kept players hooked in the mid-2000s. Combat is classic turn-based, instantly familiar if you've played games like Suikoden's or Grandia. What gives it flavor is the energy system, forcing you to decide when to unleash a strong skill and when to hold back. It's a system that rewards strategy over button mashing, and while not overly complex, it has enough depth to keep battles engaging from start to finish. Visually, the game blends 3D backdrops with anime-styled characters. It isn't a huge budget production, but that slightly rough edge feels nostalgic, as if you'd discovered a forgotten disc from the PS2 shelf. The soundtrack carries the same energy, upbeat in towns, tense in battle, and soft during story-driven moments. What makes Soul Saga worth noting is the passion behind it. You can feel the developer's love for old-school RPGs in every system and design choice. It may not have the shine of bigger titles, but it brings back the heart of why we fell in love with JRPGs in the first place. Sword of Elpisia is one of those indie RPGs that feel like they were lost in the PlayStation 2 era. Developed by Kemco, it embraces a simple but charming design that instantly recalls the mid-2000s golden years of Japanese role-playing games. The story has a dramatic hook. A young girl is transformed into a sword, and her companion must carry her on a journey to break the curse. It's strange, heartfelt, and exactly the kind of premise you'd expect from a forgotten gem. Along the way, you'll travel through towns, fight monsters, and meet quirky allies that make the adventure feel alive. Combat is where nostalgia really kicks in. The turn-based system uses menus, animations, and sound effects that could easily be mistaken for titles like Atelier Iris or Manakimia. It's easy to understand, but still allows customization with different skills, gear, and strategies. Even the HUD and transitions carry that unmistakable PS2 flavored charm. Of course, it's not on the same production level as a massive AAA release, but that's part of its appeal. Instead of overwhelming players, it offers a focused, heartfelt experience. Sword of Elpisia may not be well known, but for those who love the unique mix of simplicity and creativity from that era, it feels like discovering a hidden PS2 classic today. Eternal Radiance is a character-driven action RPG that shines through its simplicity and charm. It tells the story of Celeste, a young squire determined to prove herself worthy of knighthood. Unlike many RPGs that start with the fate of the world hanging by a thread, this one keeps its focus small and personal. A tale about growth, friendship, and the steps along the path to becoming a hero. Combat is real-time, letting you chain light attacks, dodge incoming blows, and unleash quick abilities that add variety to each encounter. It isn't trying to overwhelm you with complexity, but that works in its favor. The battles flow smoothly, delivering enough strategy to keep you engaged while still being approachable for anyone who enjoys classic hack-and-slash RPGs. Dungeons complement this flow with exploration, loot, and enemies that keep the pace steady. What really stands out is the presentation. The anime-inspired designs, colorful settings, and clean interface give the game a nostalgic quality that may remind players of mid-2000s PS2 adventures. It doesn't lean on spectacle, but rather on atmosphere and tone, with a soundtrack that matches the lighthearted yet determined spirit of Celeste's journey. Eternal Radiance doesn't aim to compete with massive productions. Instead, it offers a focused, heartfelt experience that feels cozy and familiar, like discovering a PlayStation 2 era role-playing game you somehow missed. It's proof that smaller games can still capture the same sense of wonder that keeps us coming back to the genre.
Bearer of Calamities.
Gate of Memories is an indie action RPG that blends fast combat, dark fantasy, and story-driven exploration. Based on the Beyond Fantasy tabletop RPG, it drops you into a gothic world where magic and mystery constantly collide. You play as the Bearer of Calamities, a warrior bound to an ancient book containing Ergo, a powerful spirit with a sharp tongue. Their bond is uneasy, filled with tension and sarcastic banter, but it's this dynamic that drives the story. Choices matter here, with multiple endings and branching paths that give the adventure replay value. Combat flows quickly, letting you switch between the Bearer and Ergo in real time. Sword combos, ranged magic, and special abilities keep the pace exciting, while dodges and aerial moves add a layer of style. The rhythm feels reminiscent of PlayStation 2 era hack-and-slash RPGs, with just enough depth to keep you experimenting in every fight. Exploration mixes platforming with semi-open zones, where puzzles and hidden areas reward curiosity. Visually, the game isn't about flashy production values, but its gothic castles, surreal landscapes, and anime-styled characters create a strong identity. The soundtrack ties it all together, delivering atmospheric tracks during exploration and swelling themes in combat. What makes Gate of Memories stand out is how it feels like uncovering a forgotten PS2 classic that somehow resurfaced years later. It's not perfect, but it's heartfelt, creative, and a reminder of how indie RPGs can capture the same magic once reserved for bigger productions. Alterium Shift is an indie JRPG that feels like rediscovering a forgotten classic, yet polished for today. From its pixel characters to its colorful 3D-inspired backdrops, it blends old-school charm with a fresh touch. You can start the adventure through 3 protagonists, Pyra, Atlas, and Sage, each with unique abilities, personalities, and storylines. Your choice changes the way the world unfolds, offering different perspectives and encouraging multiple playthroughs. It's a smart way to keep the experience engaging even after finishing once. The combat system uses traditional turn-based mechanics but adds speed and flair. Stylish animations and the ability to chain skills keep battles exciting, while strategy plays an important role in deciding when to attack, defend, or combine abilities for devastating combos. It strikes a balance between accessibility and depth, making it enjoyable for both veterans. What stands out is the atmosphere. The mix of retro sprites with modern presentation feels familiar without being outdated. The environments are vibrant, the character art is expressive, and the music pulls you into its fantasy setting. It captures that feeling of adventure that made so many players fall in love with JRPGs in the first place. Alterium Shift isn't about reinventing the genre. It's about reminding you why you loved it. A tribute to classic storytelling, strategic combat, and charming characters, wrapped in an experience that feels timeless. Sometimes you find a game that doesn't try to reinvent the wheel. Instead, it focuses on reminding you why you loved RPGs in the first place. That's exactly the feeling Legrand Legacy delivers. It's bold, colorful, and built with the kind of ambition only smaller studios dare to attempt. The story begins with Finn, a young slave thrown into an arena to fight for his life. In that moment of desperation, strange powers awaken inside him, setting off a journey that quickly expands into a tale of politics, betrayal, and destiny. It's the kind of narrative that feels classic yet personal, keeping you hooked as the stakes get higher. Combat takes the familiar turn-based structure and adds a clever twist. Timing. Every action comes with button prompts, forcing you to stay alert during battles. It makes each fight feel more interactive, rewarding focus and precision rather than just mashing commands. Combined with a diverse party of allies, it gives plenty of room to experiment with different strategies. Visually, Legrand Legacy blends anime-style character designs with 3D environments, giving it the look of a JRPG that could have come from a beloved console era. The cutscenes are dramatic, the world is colorful, and the soundtrack ties it all together with emotional weight. It might not have the polish of a blockbuster, but that's part of its charm. For anyone who still craves the spirit of old-school JRPGs, Legrand Legacy feels like stepping into a storybook you don't want to put down. When you first step into Lost Sphere, it doesn't scream innovation. Instead, it quietly pulls you in with its world built on memory and loss. The game opens with Kanata, a boy who discovers he can restore what's been erased by a mysterious white void. Entire towns, people, and even histories vanish, and only by channeling memories can they be brought back. It's a concept that feels both personal and poetic, giving weight to every step of the journey. The combat system mixes the comfort of turn-based RPGs with a tactical twist. Characters can reposition themselves during fights, lining up multi-target attacks, or dodging dangerous blows. It's simple to learn, but it adds a layer of strategy that keeps every battle from feeling routine. Volko suits, the mecha-like armors, take this even further, giving your team temporary bursts of power and versatility. Exploration is classic and straightforward. Towns to visit, dungeons to clear, shops to restock. What sets it apart is the presentation, clean menus, detailed animations, and an atmosphere that strongly echoes the golden era of PS2 RPGs without trying to copy them outright. Lost Sphere never became a blockbuster, but it doesn't need to be. For fans of classic-style RPGs, it offers exactly what you're looking for. A heartfelt, well-paced adventure that reminds you why the genre endures. Armed Emeth is a turn-based RPG that doesn't rely on flashy visuals or complex systems to grab your attention. Instead, it builds its identity around a clever twist. In this world, survival depends on piloting and upgrading these customizable machines, which serve as both your weapon and armor in battle. The story follows Veles, a young wanderer trying to find his place in a war-torn land. Unlike many RPGs that focus only on heroes with swords or magic, Here, the spotlight is on mechanical power. Every fight happens from within your golem, and progression is tied to how well you tune its parts. Adding new engines, cannons, shields, or gadgets changes the way you approach combat, making experimentation feel rewarding. Battles themselves stick to traditional turn-based commands, but the layer of customization is what makes them shine. Do you build a heavy tank that can take hits but moves slowly, or a lighter frame focused on high-damage strikes? Those choices shape your strategy, and they give each encounter a personal touch. Outside combat, the loop is simple but effective, exploring towns, upgrading gear, and pushing through dungeons. It doesn't overwhelm you with systems, instead delivering a steady pace that feels satisfying the more time you invest. Armed Emeth never made headlines, but that's part of its charm. It's a straightforward RPG with a unique mechanical flavor, offering fans of mecha themes and classic design a focused, enjoyable adventure. Reverie Knight's Tactics is a tactical RPG that blends fresh ideas with the kind of charm that made many PS2 strategy games unforgettable. It doesn't try to be a giant blockbuster. Instead, it focuses on smart combat, meaningful choices, and a style that instantly grabs your attention. The story puts you in control of Aurora, a leader navigating a fantasy world filled with monsters, ruins, and constant decisions. It isn't just about winning battles. The game makes you shape your characters' paths, relationships, and even major outcomes in the plot. That sense of control over both tactics and story gives it a unique identity. Combat happens on isometric battlefields, where positioning, elemental affinities, and teamwork matter. You'll combine abilities, set traps, and adapt to enemies in fights that stay challenging without ever being unfair. It's not as brutally punishing as the hardest classics, but it keeps enough depth to hook fans of the genre. The hand-drawn visuals are what really set it apart. Characters and environments look like a fantasy comic book in motion, while the clean menus and colorful animations give off a nostalgic vibe similar to mid-budget PS2 tactical RPGs. It feels like something you might have discovered back then, yet polished for modern play. It may not be widely known, but Reverie Knight's Tactics is a rewarding find for fans of strategy. With its mix of tactical depth, branching choices, and artistic flair, it captures the spirit of classic RPGs while offering a fresh experience today. Return to Dust is one of those indie RPGs that feels like it slipped out of another era. Made by just 2 developers, it combines surreal storytelling with a mix of 3D exploration and 2D dungeon crawling. On the surface, it looks like something you'd expect from the PS2's experimental years. Low-poly towns, strange landscapes, and that nostalgic mix of rough edges and creativity. But at its core, it's a modern love letter to classic RPG design. You play as Nova, a nano-cleaner tasked with venturing inside people's minds to cleanse them of dust, a metaphor for trauma and corruption. This is where the game truly shines. The overworld is in 3D, letting you explore vast and surreal environments, while the dungeons shift to top-down 2D, almost like stepping into an old Zelda-style adventure. The contrast between the 2 styles keeps things fresh, constantly surprising you with what's around the corner. Combat isn't the focus here. Instead, the hook lies in exploration, puzzle solving, and the atmosphere. The writing is sharp, often funny, but also deeply emotional, pulling you into a story that balances absurdity with sincerity. The soundtrack adds another layer, drifting between relaxing ambient tracks and unsettling melodies that match the game's dreamlike tone. It's not a massive blockbuster, but that's exactly why it stands out. Anodyne 2 thrives on its originality, giving players the feeling of uncovering a forgotten PS2 gem. Strange, heartfelt, and impossible to forget once you've experienced it. 12 indie RPGs that carry the soul of the PlayStation 2 era. Each one shows how creativity can outshine big-budget games. From tactical battles to heartfelt stories, they've got it all. If you've been missing that golden RPG feeling, now you know where to find it. Which one are you most excited to try first?